Hello, and welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. Pleased to have with me back on the show today my good friend Murray McNeil, aka Murvy. Welcome to the show, Murray.
Glad to be here.
And Murray is back again. As always, you can follow him on his Letterboxd profile, which is under Murvy, Murvie. And Murray and I are going to be doing an episode of She Directs today, which I'm very excited about. This is a segment that our friend Jason Aguayo actually came up with. I've been doing these segments with Jason, looking at mostly American female filmmakers with Jason. Jason allowed me to borrow the title for other episodes because Murray and I were really excited to explore the works of female directors from other countries for non-English language films. And so after much discussion, because there's so many different filmmakers we wanted to plunge into their work, we decided to start with the work of the French filmmaker Céline Sciamma, born in 1978 and still very much alive and present. And I'll start off with a little bit of biographical information about Celine, and then Murray, if you want to add anything about her, and then we'll launch into reviews of 4 of her 5 movies. So she's made 5 feature films that she's directed. She's written more than she's directed, and we decided to pare it down. We decided to skip her debut film, Water Lilies, and focus on her last 4 films. So Céline Sciamma, as I mentioned, is a French screenwriter and film director. She is really known for films that look at gender fluidity, sexual identity among girls and women, and of course the female gaze. Although we will talk about this, I'm sure, a little bit later. Her very last film is a little bit of a departure in that way, thematically from her other films. Her films have showed at some of the major film festivals of the world, particularly Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which is her most successful film, which premiered in competition at the Cannes Film Festival and was nominated for a slew of awards, and is most importantly in the Sight and Sound list of some of the greatest films of all time already, despite the fact it came out in 2019, pretty recently. So she is a feminist who definitely talks about being a feminist and talks about her films being from the female gaze. But I don't feel like her films often come off as, heavy-handed, because she is an artist first and foremost. So I feel like that comes through in her films as well. So I'll let you talk a little bit, Murray, about Celine and what you find striking about her films, and then we'll go into some reviews of her movies.
Well, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because we have so much in the movies, but I do want to wish her a happy birthday because we're taping on November 12th. I
Oh,
don't know when it's going to air, but this is her actual birthday. She's turning 45 today, so she's a contemporary of yours, not of mine. She's a young artist. Um, and yes, so I mean, we're going to start off with the first 3 films of hers are part of a coming of age group, which will be looking at sexuality and so forth, but not always. But it's definitely about coming of age. So we're not talking about water lilies, but we will be talking about the next 2, which changes dramatically when she gets to A Portrait of a Lady on Fire. So that's going to be, and Petite Maman, that's going to be very different. But I just wanted to bring that out, that we're going to start with a trilogy of ideas of hers about coming of age, because that's something that really interested her.
yeah, for sure. And coming of age tends to be one of my favorite genres of filmmaking, which is, I think, why I was drawn to her films so much. So we'll start with her. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Murray. I
I
was
just
going to
had
let you
one
say.
more thing, is that she does see cinema as being political, and she can't understand anyone that doesn't see it as political. She says if it's something that is non-political, that means they're completely happy with the world as it is. And her whole idea is that she is not happy with the world as it is. She studied her under Andre Tachine, who you and I
Mm,
both like, who is a gay filmmaker, film artist, and so forth. So that helped to bring her out into the world as determined to to bring that as a part of her artwork, to make that unknown and to see what she can look at and what people are struggling against in coming of age.
Yeah, for sure. And as a queer female feminist filmmaker, she definitely brings that perspective into her films. But I also find a lot of her films to be very interesting in that they are gender fluid, which we'll talk
Mhm.
about, especially with this first one. And so it's not like a strictly like, oh, I'm a lesbian filmmaker in that way. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So yeah, that's what's interesting to about me to her work. So we'll start off with her first film, which is Tomboy. And this is about a young child whose family has moved into a new neighborhood, and through a series of events, the child who's named Lori starts posing as a boy that she names Mikhail within the neighborhood kids, and even starts a relationship up of sorts as much as you can as a young child with a girl from the neighborhood. This becomes complicated, however, as Lori feels this need to kind of switch back and forth between hiding her identity among her cohort in the neighborhood, and then being Lori at home. And the first time I saw this film, what really struck me, Murray, was the towards the end, when her mother discovers what Lori has been doing, and her reaction, and the scene where she forces her to put the dress on was just absolutely heartbreaking for me. I remember there was tears in my eyes as I was watching this scene. And one of the things that I feel like is so exceptional about this movie, and I do really think it's a great film. I mean, the fact it was only her second film is just pretty mind-boggling, and how confident the filmmaking is that it's not a simple answer. There's no like, oh, the story is Lori is actually a girl, or oh, actually Lori's trans, a trans boy. Like, she's at this age, they are at this age where it is still unknown. And I think that Celine is okay with that. She's okay with it not being settled yet, or even ever, maybe, particularly for this child. She's not obviously not very comfortable in dresses and doing typically feminine things, but I don't know that she necessarily will end up, identifying as male in the long run. It's not clear. She's a child. They're a child that's still kind of figuring this all out. And I think that's what she's really trying to get across here as a filmmaker, is that for children, sometimes these things can be very fluid, and that's definitely the case in this film.
Yeah, it's really interesting because she wrote it in 3 weeks. She shot it in like 20 days. The casting was done very quickly. She had to get actresses to do this because she'd done nothing but street casting from the previous film. And, she was lucky to get this person, this actress, and what's her name? Her name is Zoe Heron. And she is, for me, I thought part of the tension of the film was the fact that she's watching these boys when she's declared herself as Mikhail, and she's decided that she's going to try this. She's watching them, and they take their shirts off, and they spit on the ground. So she's at home in front of the mirror, making sure that how she looks, and she decides, well, I can take my shirt off. I don't think I'm going to identify as a female. And part of my attention watching this is I'm thinking, well, I can tell you're female.
Mm,
As someone watching this, I can see, but it's kind of like you have to kind of give it into the kids. You're going to give her a lot of leeway to be this other person that she pretends to be. And so she goes off, and it's kind of funny to watch her go off and start playing football with these boys, and like she's going over and she's purposely spitting. But then, almost immediately they go off and they all decide to go off and pee, and they line up just directly off the court, and these guys are just going to pee. Well, she can't do that. So she has to run off to the woods, and she gets caught by one of the boys that sees her kind of squatting, and she jumps up and she ends up peeing on herself. And so she has to run off to go home and so forth. And so, I mean, there's success and there's failures that are going on in all this. And of course, with Lisa, like you said, there's this sort of relationship that's building, which eventually builds up to a kiss. And at one point, I know you're going to get into this, but she goes home and because they're going to go bathing. So she gets this clay and she makes this little penis that she puts down into her underwear,
mhm.
bathing suit, whatever it is, so that she can go off and be a part of the boys. But when that happens and it's her and she's wrestling with a boy, it was very evident to me that she's a girl. Her nipples don't look like a boy's nipples and stuff. I know this sounds, but it's just she looks like a girl trying to look like a boy. So I mean, that tension was always there. It was kind of wonderful. And eventually, when you're talking about the mother putting the dress on her, and she tells her, "I'm not doing this to hurt you," because I think even Lori knew that eventually she has to go to school. She's not going to get away with this forever. It's like she gets a chance to play this and feel it out and see what it's like to be like a boy. Where am I with this? And she does find that she's, she kisses Lori, I mean, kisses Lisa. And, I mean, so I think that she is discovering that that's at least a part of her that she wants to explore further and probably will down the line. But, at that day and age, I mean, even in France, you couldn't identify as a different gender at school and get away with it. So
Right. And I think since this film was made, I think a lot has happened that's more progressive than that. But I mean, I don't know if I 100% agree with you on the you can tell immediately that Lori's a girl. I mean, I think if to me, a lot of kids are very gender fluid, especially at a certain age. I've seen a lot of little boys that look like girls and vice versa. And so, yes, when you see them naked, I suppose there's a bit, I felt like that also played into that children often can look rather gender fluid and depending on the child. And so that also was very interesting to me. But I do think that she's kind of playing with these notions um, of being ambiguous about that, like you said, yes, Lori will have to probably for school eventually figure, but also like the fact that she's kind of forced into this role, she's not really clear what she wants yet, I think, exactly. So yeah, because she's really young. So I think, I don't know, I just thought it was really interesting. The relationship with her sister is very interesting, and I liked that aspect of it as well. So
she chose the sister because she wanted her to be very girly, to be absolutely the opposite of her. And her
hmm
room, the colors are very important to Celine. The blue that she chose for Lori, and then the colors in their sister's room. And she even takes the blue out into the woods. And I want to bring that up because they're in this suburb of Paris, but there's a whole wooded area around them. And the wooded area is a natural area where she can bring out part of. To me, it was a significant thing, to bring out her true self, that you can go out there and you
mm,
can explore in the woods, in nature, what your true nature is, and so forth.
right.
But she had the color of the blue in the back court was the same as the color of the blue of her room, which is of course blue. I don't know if in France blue and pink are chosen as those gender deciding colors, but it seemed like a real choice to pick blue for her room that
Yeah,
she.
I can see that as well. So yes, obviously a great film. Highly recommend folks change it out, especially if you love great coming of age stories. We should probably move on to the next one, which is
Yeah.
yours to introduce.
Okay, well, the next one is called Girlhood. So this is the third one of this series. Now, this one is different, and this will be something to talk about, is the fact that she has chosen to look at the culture of the Black immigrants living in France. And so she has and the name of the movie is Girlhood in America, which hood in the hood, you can kind of look at that, whether that was decisive or not, but it actually translates in France to Bunch of Girls, which
Hmm.
I think is a better title, considering that they have these groups of girls that are in groups of four, and it's always decided it has to be four. But you have this teenager, she's being told by her counselor that she's not going to be able to go on into academics. And that's what they do in France, that at a certain point they decide, yes, you can go on in academics or you have to go to vocational school. And she's
hmm
being told she has to go to vocational school, which she doesn't want to have to do. She knows that's going to upset her family dynamic. And so she goes home, and her mother works as a maid at a hotel and is working almost all the time. So she, at one point she lies to her mother and tells her that she's going on into academics. But the house is ruled by her brother, and she has two other sisters, a sister that's just starting to develop, and a much younger child that's probably like about 4 or 5. And so this is this thing, she's living in kind of it's sort of like not quite the tenements of the Depan film, the Jacques
hmm
Audiard film. It's not quite
It's
as
not, yeah,
that.
it's like the suburbs though of Paris where a lot of the more of
Right.
the immigrant families live. Yeah.
So she's suddenly invited, and so there's a boy that's the friend of her brother, who she has a crush on, but he's not really looking at her because as her brother's friend, he would not be allowed to get involved with her. But she keeps kind of pushing this by walking around where he's going to be and so forth. And she comes out of school, and these three girls are there, and this one character named Lady, we find her name is Lady. She asks her to join them in going to Paris. And she says no. And then she's walking away when she suddenly realizes that this boy, Abu, is talking to them, and she goes back. It's like, this is a chance for her to get closer to Abu. So she runs back, or not runs back. She goes back and she starts talking to them, and they all end up going to Paris, which is one of the things about this. These girls go to places as groups and to get away from this male-dominated dynamic where they can kind of be
Hmm.
their own. And in Paris, there are other groups of these groups of 4 black girls, and they'll get into interactions with them, and they're playing around and having fun, going shopping, doing these things, and they end up getting a hotel room or whatever it is, and they go in there together and they all drink and have fun and dance around. In fact, they do this dance to Rihanna's um, uh,
Diamonds.
diamonds, like a diamond in the sky, and which is very particularly chosen. And Rihanna gave up the rights so that they could use this song because she so much loved the scene when she was sent the shot scene. She let them do
Yeah.
this. But
Which she
it's
did not have the budget for that song because that song
right.
was a huge hit. So yeah,
And
it
this
was
is a film
very
that
nice of
doesn't have
Rihanna to do that.
this is a film that only has diegetic film music in it. So the characters can hear the music and the audience can hear it. There's never any music otherwise.
Yeah.
And so which actually was true with Tomboy too, I think. So anyways, so they have this group, and then what's going on is she's going home, and she starts to have a relationship with this boy, and that's kind of developing. But at one point, she gets caught, and that's when the brother really gets angry, and he's going to, I mean, it's obviously he's going to make some kind of change, and she goes to the boy who she's been sleeping with at this point, and he asked her to marry him, and she says no. And this is a big point in this film is that she goes, I don't want to be, have a baby with you and be trapped in this life that she sees around her. I mean, there's so much to talk about, but the reason she got into this group of the 4 girls is the one girl that she replaced got pregnant, and that's why she was brought in. So someone that's being trapped with a child, she doesn't want that. So,
Hmm.
how this film ends is that she's really um, just saying, I won't have anything to do with any of it. I'm
Yeah.
just going to try to live my own life out of the system. And it's sort of a she gets changed to Victory. I mean, there's so much, but Lady gives her this chain, which changes her name to Vic for Victory. And you find out the lady was originally named Sophie. So they all kind of gain these names, but that's, she's going to have victory over this life where it's trying to be imposed upon her. Sorry, it was a lot.
It's a really great film. I'm curious, Murray, in the four that we're reviewing, where does Girlhood rank for you? I mean, we're going chronological here, but
Right.
which
Well,
would you say it's your one of
it's
your favorites or
it's my least of all of her films, but for various reasons. And I really she wrote this. She did absolutely no research, but she's been criticized for heavily because she did no research. Didn't get anyone to try to co-write that might be from that
Mhm.
group. And so why was she writing a movie about the Black community? And so, but she said, I mean, I kind of knew what I knew, and I don't care about that. My films are, arts, they're cinema. I'm trying to do something else with it, so it's not really as important whether I got every detail right about the culture of this group. But I mean, it's problematic in a way. I really love the film. When I saw it, I gave it I gave it a B plus. So, and I think
Yeah,
the girl that plays her name is Karija Toure. She's fantastic. The girl
yeah,
that
she's
plays the
really
main.
good. She makes the movie, yeah. And I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's my least favorite of her films, which is to say that the other ones are like all 4 stars, depending on your rating system. For Real Film Snobs, 4 stars. I would say all of her films are 4 stars. This one's like 3.5 for me. So it's not like she's only made great films, which is one of the reasons we're profiling her because she's made 5 films and they're all
Right.
really great. So, which is unusual. But Girlhood is her lesser film, but that is not to say it is not a good film. And I just that the others are all so terrific. So, but I know we want to have time to talk about the other two, and we've only got 9 minutes left. So I'm going to move it on to her masterpiece. I think that most people would agree to her masterpiece. So go ahead, introduce that one, Marie.
Yeah, and this is a very complicated one in a way too, but we'll try to condense it down as much as we can to get it going. Um, this artist is brought to this island, and she's being brought there to paint this girl that's there, and she finds out the reason that she's there is that she's being set up to be married to a man in Milan, and she had just come from a convent, and the reason she was there was that her older sister, had committed suicide under the idea that she might have to marry this man from Milan. And so this is another place where someone's going to be trapped into the cultural thing that they don't want to have to do. And this painter's brought in, and she's told that she would not sit for a painting, so she has to pretend that she is actually just her her sort of a I don't know,
Companion.
her companion, to walk her around and just sort of be with her and so forth, where she's trying to paint her on her own time and sneak around with it. The thing about this is that these women start developing. She does succeed in painting a portrait, but it's terrible because the relationship is so stiff. But they're starting to get to know each other, and what happens is that they start to interact and they fall in love. Now, I'm going to put this out there because it's important that this woman came from a convent, and we're going to be dealing with myth. There's a myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, but she is sort of in a platonic and the Plato's cave where she's been living a life. She liked the life in the convent because she had access to literature and she had access to music, but she had no life to interact with that with. And Celine makes very important that she wants her films to be interacting with the viewer. So what the viewer is bringing in from their own life is important. So when these two women start having a real life together and they fall in love, then the next portrait that she's painting is, of course, going to be her real self, in a sense, or at least a version of the painter's love for her and how she sees her. And so she's able to get some real depth to her, a little bit of a smile. She's very stiff when she first gets there, and she learns to smile. But all of this is built into the fact that they know that she's going to be sent to Milan and she's going to do this thing. So, I mean, I don't know how much I want to reveal here right now exactly, except that, she's going to see her twice later. And she does ask the artist if she could have her paint a picture of her so that she has this. So she takes one of her books and paints a picture of herself nude on page 28. And so later on, after they're separated and she goes off to Milan to have this marriage, and this painter is showing a work at a gallery. She finds out, and by the way, the work is about Orpheus and Eurydice, but she finds this portrait of the Heloise, the character that she loves, and she's sitting with child, probably like about 4 or 5 years old now. She has a fairly good countenance. She doesn't look she's terribly unhappy, but she has a book in her lap, and the book is opened up with the number 28 written on the page, so that everyone sees that she's sending a message, knowing that her lover would see this and know that she still remembers her and thinks about her. And then she does see her one final last time listening to when they're both there listening to Vivaldi's Summer, which is they spent this summer together. And so she close-ups it shows a close-up on Heloise as she's crying and smiling at the end. They don't interact at all. And that's where we have to talk about that. It won't make any sense without knowing the Orpheus and Eurydice myth to some point, but that's important to the story. But that's the basic outline.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think the movie makes fine sense just as a romance, even if you don't know about the myth. I mean, of course, that adds depth to it, but at its heart, it's a romance. I mean, it's a beautiful romantic film, which is one of the reasons I think it was so acclaimed when it came out, right, in 2019, because we don't get good romances anymore in the cinema the way we used to. Not as many, that's for sure. And the fact it was number 30 on Sight and Sound's recent list of the greatest films of all time, the only film to be listed from the 2010s, is pretty remarkable. I think what she's achieved here is remarkable with Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I have to say the name of the movie because you didn't mention that.
Yeah,
But
right.
the two main actresses have great chemistry. Naomi Moriarty and Adele Hanel are just, like you said at the beginning, they're a little bit more stiff. They're not sure of each other, but as their relationship develops, they just have, in my opinion, one of the great on screen, passionate relationships that translates through cinema. You know, we don't see great romances, and everything from the use of the inner photography where they didn't use any artificial lighting. So there's a lot of darkness, which is what they would have had in that period. It's a costume drama, but not of the Merchant Ivory variety, which I don't mind. I like Merchant Ivory films, but it has a more modern feeling than those films do. So it's just it's just a masterpiece.
Well, she
Period.
wanted it stark. I know the first time I watched it that I felt it was a little cold because, and I found, they chose to use digital film because they wanted to get right in there and get skin color and so forth. But they had the actresses, no one can move very quickly. They had to be very careful how they were moving because it would blur it. So, and she would have them count them. If you're going to go over to grab this plate, you do it in 5 steps. She wanted it to be, it was that exacting, like a David Fincher kind of film. So
Hmm.
that way it and everything looked like a painting. You could stop it anywhere and it looked like a painting. So it wasn't until the probably this, especially this last, probably my fourth viewing of it, that I really saw the full romance and the warmth and how she's developing this and how it's opening up. I mean, because the only that one time when she runs is the only time you ever see the action. When she first meets her and she's as a companion, that she gets out with her and she starts running towards the cliff and she thinks, "My God, she's going to jump off the cliff just like her sister."
Hmm.
And she turns around and says, she goes, I've always wanted to do that. She said, die? And she goes, no, I've always wanted to run. She just wanted the freedom of that
Right.
running and so
It's a
forth.
lot about women's freedom, and in addition to the romance, these two women one who has chosen to live unconventionally and has more freedom than the other one.
Yeah.
We can't get into all the themes. You could do a whole episode just on this movie, but
No, but the
we only have
myth,
2 minutes left.
okay, well, the myth is important because, and people don't know this myth, and it's too much to really explain, except that somebody loves someone so much that he goes down to Hades to try to bring her back, and they say they can, but he can't turn around and look at her, otherwise she'll have to return. And
Right.
at the very last minute, he does, which has happened in the movie because they discuss this about whether it's the poets, the artists view, because they are wondering why did he turn around, or did she ask him to turn around? And that they're going to see each other eventually anyway. So that in this situation, it doesn't do any good. They're stuck in what they're stuck in, which is kind of this thing where she's going to go out to Milan. And so when the artist, when the character is leaving, she says to her just before when she gets to the door, turn around, and she makes her look back at her, and
Yeah.
I mean, so it's very
Yeah. I
important.
mean, it's important to understand all the subcontext, but I'm just saying if folks,
But it's
regular
real
folks
love.
who, yes, it's
It's
about
real
love.
love. Is the reason she turns around is out of love, not out of, it's not, it's like taking this myth and making it real and making it filling it full of life, which is what it should always be in the first place. It's kind of what she does. She takes this whole myth and makes it alive. It's just exciting.
Yes. So we're gonna move on. I have half a minute for the last movie, which is
No
Petite
way. Oh,
Petite
okay.
Maman, a young girl coping with the death of her grandmother and her grief. They go to the house where her grandmother lived, and her mother just can't be there, so her mother leaves, and so the young girl is there alone while her father's sifting through all the things, and she starts to develop a magical bond with her mother as a child. So this one is probably in some way the most fantastical of all of Celine Sciamma's films. It's also one of the few ones that's a lot less about gender fluidity and sexuality and much more in this way about grief and coping, but also about this feeling that you'll never really know your parents. Like uh, they're your parents are these kind of like mystical, kind of mysterious people to you. And in her case, this opportunity to get to know her mother as a child brings her closer to her mother, but also lets her know a little bit more about who she is. Oh wow, we have 8 seconds left. This also is a great movie. It's only 70 minutes, so it's a really quick watch. Murray, in one sentence, say something about it.
5 stars, 5 stars. It could be my favorite. It could be my favorite. It's also kind of her creating a modern myth where she has lives in this timeless zone and is able to meet her mother at the same age. She used twins to bring this across, these two twins, and it's just a beautiful film. It might feel like a fairy tale, but it's not fairy tale in the fairy tale sense. It feels very real, and
It's like
yeah, it's just
yeah, it's magic realism is how I'd say it, and like fairy
yes.
tale-ish, but doesn't for people that like childhood coming of age stories and things that are a little bit more magic realism. I highly recommend this one. So we have to go. Thank you, Murray, for being on the show.
Love it.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Have a great day and great movies.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.